Okay, number 5. They came up with a science called al-Jarḥ wa-Ta'dīl. Al-Jarḥ wa-Ta'dīl. Now, what does this mean? This is very similar to one of the narrator criticism. It's the science of narrator criticism. So before we talked about just specifically talking about like what issue this narrator has, this is the actual science of it, which includes praising narrators as well. So this is the science of, let's see, I mentioned here on the slide, what does jarh mean? Jarh in Arabic is with a ha, jarh, jim, ra, ha. It means to wound someone. You stab someone, that's called a jarh. When used in hadith terminology, it means when an imam of hadith, he criticizes a narrator in a way that their narrations cannot be accepted. So he says, okay, he's a shaitan or he's a kadhab. Or there's less words. Those are the most severe. I keep talking about those because it interests me to call someone a shaitan, right? But you could say, laysa bi shay, he's not that great. Saduq, that's actually acceptable. There's a fine line between barely acceptable and rejected. So if we have time, we'll talk about the sciences of Jarh Ta'dil. Otherwise, we'll leave it for next month. What are the terms that the scholars, they break them down into categories, like 7 categories of praises, 7 categories of criticisms. So it gets worse and worse, or better and better. The highest ones are like Amirul Mu'mineen fil Hadith. He's the Khalifa when it comes to Hadith. Or like, he's never seen anyone like himself. Or, they praise him greatly. And the worst of the, jarh is like that, what I mentioned before, Dajjal, Shaitan, and stuff like that. So now what does ta'adil mean? So the science of jarh and ta'adil. Wa means and, jarh and ta'adil. Ta'adil means to praise someone. When used in hadith terminology, it means when an imam praises a narrator in a way that their narrations can be accepted. So this is a very detailed science. It's one of the harder sciences to get into in hadith, because as a student, when you're studying, you have all these opinions of the imams regarding a specific person. Sometimes you even find one imam saying he's really good, another imam saying he's not. So then you need to understand why each imam is saying what they're saying. And then if there is an actual contradiction, who do you prefer over others? It's really intricate. But we have all the books, we have all what they have said regarding this issue. So all of the narrators, you can practically find something about them in these books. So now, let's move on. What is studied in al-Jarḥ wa Ta'dīl? So I'm going to show you a list of things that scholars look at when you study al-Jarḥ wa Ta'dīl. So you look at the lives of the narrators, kind of like we talked about in history, but a little bit more about criticism and acceptance. Their lives, what are their narrations? So every narrator, they know which narrations they've made. They made a collection of it. Who are their teachers? Who are their students? So every narrator, they do this. Their reliability and trustworthiness, their memory and forgetfulness, their accuracy and mistakes. So is this person someone who makes a lot of mistakes, or they're always accurate? Strengths and weaknesses. How did they gain knowledge, the acquisition of knowledge? How did they transmit their knowledge? Who are their, how were they in terms of giving the knowledge? Their youth, their adulthood, their old age, their place of residence, where did they live? Their travels, where did they travel to? Their praiseworthy traits. Did they follow the sunnah, or did they have innovations? Did they have any blameworthy traits and criticisms that we should be aware of? What affects their dignity? We'll talk about what dignity is. This is not doing halal and haram, it's kind of in the middle. What affects their dignity? Did they fabricate hadith? Their birth, their death, all of these things. So you can actually read these things about narrators. Sometimes the more famous narrators, you have like their whole biography written out. And sometimes you find some really nice stories as well. Just like if you wanted to read a storybook, you can actually open up some of these books on narrator criticism and read them. Imam Zahabi has this very famous book called Siyar A'lam al-Nubala, the life stories of the very noble people. I think that's one Arabic word that they use in English. Noble comes from Nabil. Anyone heard someone named Nabil? The Nabil, and the plural of that is Nubala. So noble comes from Nabil. That's what it means. So he wrote this book, and he spans from the era of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Sahaba, and the major muhaddithin, all the way to the 700s. That's when he lived. So the book is like 25 volumes. Some people even read it. They cover to cover, they read the whole book. You get to read all these different stories and stuff like that as well. So they mention all of this. And the main purpose is to preserve the hadith. Next, we look at the dangers of al-Jarḥ wa Ta'dil. It's not a easy science. So let's see. There's a very lengthy quote here, but I'm going to skip that. So one scholar of hadith, he said, the judges and the muhaddithin are on the, wait, let me see. Ibn Daqiq al-Eid, actually, he said a quote before this, so let me quote him first. He says, due to the difficulty of not being plagued with the 5 types of calamities, he mentions 5 different issues. I'm not going to go into that. He says, a person can be in a great harm, can do great harm to themselves by doing al-Jarḥ wa Ta'dil. Why is that? This is due to the fact that a person might not have the qualifications to do al-Jarḥ wa Ta'dil, so they can do a lot of harm to themselves. A person must have integrity, justice, knowledge, piety, freedom from their own desires, biases, jealousy, plotting, and hatred. For this reason, I am saying, Ibn Daqiq al-Eid says, I am saying the dignity of Muslims is a pit among the pits of hell. Meaning, if you take away the dignity of a Muslim, you're throwing yourself in Jahannam. And he says 2 types of people stand on the edge of Jahannam. That is, judges and muhaddithin. They're standing, and there's a pit of fire in front of them. They could slip and fall into the fire, or they can stay back. He says judges and muhaddithin. Why? Because judges have to rule in favor of someone. So if you rule incorrectly, then you're going to fall into the fire of Jahannam. And in one hadith, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, if anyone is a qadi or a judge, it's as if they've been slaughtered without a knife. كَأَنَّهُ ذُبِحَ بِغَيْرِ سِكِّينٍ. He says, if you're a judge, because you have to decide, is this person truthful? Is this who goes to jail? Sometimes they're wrong. Innocent people go to jail. So he's like, you've been slaughtered and no one even put a knife to your neck. So those are judges. And then he says the other person are the muhaddithin, because they have to speak about this. And then another scholar, he said, actually judges and muhaddithin are not the same. Judges have an excuse. They judge according to proofs. So you bring them proof and they'll judge according to that. So they're excused. As for muhaddithin, they only judge according to what they heard other people say. So they're in more danger. So he's saying muhaddithin are in great danger if they mess up. And that's why not everyone can do this, al-Jarḥ wa Ta'dil. It's a very intricate science, and you should be very careful about it, because you can easily fall into ghibah. It was reported that Ibn Abi Hatim is a huge scholar. He wrote this book called al-Jarḥ wa Ta'dil. This book is named al-Jarḥ wa Ta'dil. Really big book. It builds on Imam Bukhari's book, At-Tarikh al-Kabir. Imam Bukhari has a book on Jarḥ Ta'dil. So Ibn Abi Hatim took that book and he asked his father and his uncle, who were great muhaddithin, about what was already in the book, and he added more onto it. So it became this really huge book. We still have it today. And you can look up narrators, all of the different criticisms and appraisals of narrators in there. So he was reading his book, and this one Sufi sheikh came. Some of the Sufis, they don't have so much knowledge, but they're very pious. So this person came, and Ibn Abi Hatim, he was reading his book, al-Jarḥ wa Ta'dil, criticisms. So this Sufi, he said, how many of these people they've already stepped into Jannah for 100 or 200 years, and you're doing ghibah about them? And he started crying. He felt very bad. But he had to do it. This is for hadith. In another situation, same thing. Ibn Abi Hatim, he was reading his books to his students. So that book, al-Jarḥ wa Ta'dil, about narrator criticism, he's reading it to his students. And then he came across a statement in the book about Yahya ibn Ma'in. He was a great scholar of hadith. And he said, Yahya ibn Ma'in says in the book, and Ibn Abi Hatim is reading the book, he says, we are criticizing people. Perhaps they have traveled to Jannah for 200 years. And so, it's really a scary thing. And so Ibn Abi Hatim, he's reading the book. He started crying so much, he started shaking, and the book fell out of his hand. So he was, overwhelmed by this. So the traditional muhaddithin, used to be very careful about this. They did not want to do ghiba. Okay, so now I'm going to share with you some names. Now, there's no way you're going to write all this, but just to show you, I want to read to you something that Sheikh Abdul Fattah he wrote. Let's see. Okay, so Sheikh Abdul Fattah he writes about al-Jarḥ wa Ta'dīl, this science. He says, due to this reason, meaning how difficult it is, and it's just so harmful for a person to do it. But for the sake of deen, it must be done. So he says, due to this reason and the stringent conditions needed for an appraiser and criticizer, the amount of the great scholars of Jarh and Ta'dil are extremely few in comparison to other muhaddithin and narrators. You have very few of people who can do Jarh and Ta'dil. But you have a lot of general muhaddithin and narrators. Like I mentioned, just in the 6 books, there's 10,000. So he says there are thousands upon thousands of muhaddithin and narrators, while the criticizers and appraisers, Jarh and Ta'dil, they're definitely not even 1,000. Altogether, if you were to get all the people who did Jarh and Ta'dil, you will not find 1,000 of them. And the experts among them, they're not even 200. And he says the greatest of them are less than 100. So not even 100 out of tens of thousands of narrators, you can't even find 100 that can do this science, that are experts at it. It's a very intricate science. So we have some of them. So now I'm going to share with you the names of some of them, inshallah. So see if you can, if you notice any names. I'm just going to pull up their names, inshallah. I wasn't planning on reading any of their names. Just wanted you guys to notice if you see any names that you have heard of before. Okay. So among them, you guys would have to mute your phones, inshallah. Otherwise, there's going to be echo. You can't mute an iPhone? Or just put the volume down or something? Or I don't know. You just can't go like the lowest volume, they can't go. Okay. So inshallah, do you guys see the names? Yeah. Who call out some names that you guys recognize? Sha'bi is the one that got thrown at. He got pebbled. Okay. Who else do you guys notice? Ahmad bin Hanbal is there, mashallah. Abu Zur'a, he was a great. All of these are the top muhaddithin. Sisters, you guys heard of any of these narrators before? Okay. Yes. Which one? Nasa'i, yeah. Nasa'i. This is the scholar, Sunan al-Nasa'i, that's him. Abu Dawud above him is Sunan Abi Dawud. Above him, at-Tirmidhi, right? Bukhari is there. In the middle list, Bukhari is there. Bukhari is among the top. He wrote on narrators. He has a Tarikh al-Kabir. It's a book on narrators. Imam Tahawi is there. He's a great Hanafi scholar as well. Imam Razi, there's many Razis, so there's a Razi in Tafsir as well, and Ash'ari Razi as well, Shafi'i. Muslim is there, Imam Muslim. Yeah, Muslim bin al-Hajjaj. Who? At-Tabari. Ibn Jarir at-Tabari, yeah, that's the famous Tabari. Okay, so these are all very famous. So when you hear these names, these are the top scholars in Hadith. Among thousands and thousands, these are like the top. So, but it shows you also there's so many that we don't know of. There's many that we don't know. We know like Bukhari, Muslim, etc. But Ishaq bin Rahway, he was a teacher of Bukhari. Ali ibn al-Madini, he was also the teacher of Bukhari. Everyone knows Imam Ahmad. Muhammad bin Yahya al-Zuhali, very famous as well, yes? Many of them did. Many of these scholars also have books in Hadith. So you can still, some of them are lost, like Baqi bin Makhlad. I told you about him, he's Spanish. He came from Spain and walked to Iran. He walked to Iran from Spain. He had the largest collection of Hadith that is lost. We don't have it anymore, yes? The numbers are when they died. So I didn't have all of them. I'd have to research a little bit. The numbers are the date that they died, Hijri dates. So you can see it starts from Sha'bi, who's very early on, and we go into the late 300s. Right. So let's move on. There's still some more. Okay, so here's some more. Anyone heard of Dar Qutni? Dar Qutni is very famous. Yeah, Dar Qutni. He's from Dar Qut. It's a place. Ibn Abdul Barr. Anyone heard of him? He's a huge Maliki scholar, among like the top Maliki scholars. Ibn Hazm. Everyone should have heard Ibn Hazm Andalusi. He's a Spanish scholar. They have a statue of him in Spain. He has like a turban. And he has like his books in his hand. I mean, it's there. Bayhaqi, Khatib Baghdadi, we talked about him. Imam al-Mundiri, Ibn al-Salah, we'll talk about him soon. Ibn Taymiyyah. So these are all scholars that you've heard of. These are the great muhaddithin. And then the last bit here, these are about 50 names here. Ibn Sayyid al-Nas. Imam al-Zayla'i, who is a Hanafi scholar as well. Mughal is also a Hanafi scholar. Zayn al-Iraqi is the teacher of Ibn Hajar. Ibn Hajar is there. Have you guys heard of Ibn Hajar? Very famous, probably like one of the greatest. Badruddin al-Aini is there. And Jalaluddin al-Suyuti. You guys heard of Suyuti? Suyuti is really famous. Anyone heard Tafsir Jalalain? Tafsir Jalalain? He wrote half of Tafsir Jalalain. So it's Jalaluddin al-Suyuti. He's the last one mentioned there. So 900s. So these are spanning from 100 all the way to the 900s. These are the top muhaddithin in the ummah. Their names, just so you can just see them, inshallah. If you hear their names later on, you'll be like, okay, I heard that name before. Who? Imam Ghazali was not. He was more of a rational in aqidah and Shafi'i fiqh and tasawwuf. Those were his fields more. He started studying hadith at the end of his life, but he passed away in his 50s, so like he didn't really get into it too much. But yeah, these are the great muhaddithin. All right, so let's move on. We have number 6. Remember, there's 7 different sciences they came up with. So we talked about isnad, narrator criticism, textual criticism, jarh, ta'dil, and now we're going to ilal al-hadith. So if you thought that al-jarh wa ta'dil was difficult, this is even higher level science. Those same scholars that we talked about in jarh and ta'dil, they are also the ones that can do this that we're going to talk about. It was said to Abdurrahman bin Mahdi, you say that so-and-so hadith is sahih and another isn't established at all. Who have you gotten this from? He replied, when you approach an appraiser of gold and silver and you show him your dirhams, your gold and silver, he says, this is authentic and this is counterfeit. Do you ask him where he understood that from, or do you just accept what he says? This is the same. It's known through long company of the shuyukh, long hours of debate and experience. So what is he talking about here? He is talking about a concept called ilalul hadith. So he was saying, someone came up to him and he said that, okay, ilalul hadith is a field where the sanad is sahih. The sanad looks like it's sahih. It looks like it. But there's some hidden defects somewhere in there. And we'll look into like what these defects can be. Sometimes a hadith, one sanad is authentic, it goes all the way to Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, it's unbroken. Another same hadith, same chain, but it doesn't have the Sahabi mentioned, and that one's stronger. So then sometimes they'll say this authentic chain that goes all the way to Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is rejected, even though it's Sahih, because the other one is more authentic and it doesn't have the Sahabi. There's details about this, but this is a very hard to determine science. Illa means a defect. So this is the science of defective hadith. So it's when a hadith looks sahih, it meets all the requirements, but there is some hidden aspect in the hadith that causes it to be rejected. Okay, so we will look at a little bit in ilal when we get into the sciences of hadith, inshallah, after Maghrib. Should we pause here? Okay. Let's move on. Okay, we're going to do the last science after. Ilal hadith is basically, there's some hidden aspect of hadith, and the scholars, they can pinpoint it through their experience. They don't really, there's no real terms for it at times. They just know that there's some aspect that's wrong in it. But later on, the later scholars, they made terms for it. The earlier scholars, they didn't have terms for it. They would just tell you that this is a mistake in this hadith, and we're not going to accept it. And the last one we're going to do, which leads us into the next module, is the Sciences of al-Ḥadīth. So this is what we're going to talk about after Maghrib, and then we're going to complete, inshallah, and start talking about hadith terminology, which is this. This is the field that we're going to focus on, and it kind of summarizes all the previous fields into one. This field, it summarizes all the major fields of hadith into one field, and that's what we're going to look at a little bit after Maghrib, inshallah. We're going to look about this and then start that next module.